Good afternoon. It's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology, and it's our regular OpsRamp Wednesday. And on a Wednesday, what we talk about is ITOM, so IT Operations Management. And we also talk about AIOPs, so artificial intelligence for operations, and talk around some of the benefits in that space. And what I thought I'd do today is just give you a bit of history of why we're doing what we're doing, and a lot of it comes back from about 2 or 3 years ago when we started working with Aston University and their Advanced Services Group. And what we did was just look at what we were doing as a business. And with their help, we tried to look at how we could actually bring more of a capability to our customers. Whether that was the capability of operating a particular application set to run their business, or whether it's something around the operational aspects of their infrastructure or cloud services. And that's what started our thought process around 2.5, nearly 3 years ago. Since then, we've been looking into more depth about what we deliver and how we deliver it. And one of the key areas we found around about 12 months ago was around the operational capabilities of most organizations and the skills gap that they have. What we found is a lot of organizations have gone down a particular route with their infrastructure based upon what they've got from a skills and experience internally at that point in time, which might not be the appropriate technology for what they need to take the business forward. But like many things, you tend to go with what you know yourself at the point in time. So we've got a lot of organizations, especially in the container space, which I was talking about on Monday, that are actually running containers within a hypervisor, such as VMware. So they're getting a lot of cost issues because having to pay for large licensing costs for infrastructure that's not giving them a great deal of benefit for what they're trying to deliver. They're also having other challenges around how they control that infrastructure, having like God rights for their container hosts and make it quite easy for someone to accidentally take out a production workload rather than a test and dev workload because it's so easy to do it. You can't subdivide that environment. So if we go back to where people are in their own infrastructure, what we found is most people are actually running multiple platforms. So for their basic infrastructure, such as physical hosts, networking, and those kind of things, they're using something like SolarWinds to monitor that infrastructure, get a picture of what's happening there. For the application side of things, they're using an APM tool, so something like New Relic or App Dynamics to understand what's happening within the application, which gives them a really good understanding of the application itself. And then they're using some other technologies around that to get a better picture of what's happening. The trouble being then, you've got three different sets of infrastructure to monitor. It's difficult to see where, what you're looking at. And what we find is over time, you end up with a very large amount of information coming back to them. So you get to a point where you actually either turn some of it off because it's just too much information. You're getting so many false positives and so many alerts that, it's just too much for the people who are actually monitoring it. So we decided that we wanted to find something that would allow us to monitor everything. And we were considering most of our customers had one or two on-premise locations, whether that was a colo facility or whether it was a data center on one of their facility sites. Plus, they were also working with some SaaS delivery, something like Office 365 for email and other services. They were also looking at cloud-based platforms, whether that's traditional virtualization within Amazon Web Services or Azure, or they were actually going down the container route and using something like the container Kubernetes services out of Google Cloud Platform, or again in AWS or Azure as well. So they ended up with a situation that they have multiple environments, multiple types of technology. And if we consider something like Kubernetes and containers, they are very dynamic in nature. And it's not just in the test and dev environment, it's actually in the operational space, they're quite dynamic as well. So you can have replicas appearing and disappearing if needed. And also, you might want to trigger things like the increase in the number of front-end web services, as the capacity is required for whatever system you're selling. So if you're, say, a ticketing system selling either travel or event tickets, not that many people are traveling or going to events at the moment, but if you were, what you might need to do is increase capacity when you've got times where people are very interested in particular travel or events that you're selling. So increasing that capacity out and spinning up more containers to deploy that makes it a very, very dynamic environment. So we spoke to a lot of our customers and there was a skills gap. One, they didn't really have the skills for this container space to understand it and know what to do with it. And the other side was they were having difficulty getting people to understand the cloud space, and they were using a lot of contractors to do that. I think also, timing wise, we had a few issues as HMRC were looking to introduce IR35 and the changes. A lot of organisations was trying to do away with some of their contractors or move those contractors in as full-time employees. Just as the COVID-19 situation hit as well. So I think we had a calamity of things all at once. COVID situation, so we're all locked down, a lot of people working from home. We had this AR35, so a lot of contractors either changing roles or becoming unemployed, and that's they've been impacted by the financial aspects of it at that time as well. So a lot of things were changing. So from our perspective, we needed something that could look across all of it, but also be dynamic. It could actually understand the changes in there, because if you're getting containers appearing and disappearing, you'll want your monitoring infrastructure to be able to see those appear and disappear and monitor them while they're available. So from a cloud perspective, the solution that we went with, which is OpsRamp, as it's OpsRamp Wednesday, can allow us to look through the API into all of those cloud services, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, Azure from Microsoft, and actually understand exactly what's there at any point in time. So if there are new virtual machines or containers that are being deployed, we can automatically set up and start to monitor those. Plus also we can set up automatically the type of remediation activity that we want in the background. So if we get a particular event, say a service or a process within a Windows or Linux environment is running a very high process, very high memory, and we need to do something about it, we can also then look at automation. So that automation could be to simply restart that service and test afterwards that the situation has changed. If it's not fixed it, then notify someone to ensure that someone can go and look specifically at that. But what we key to this was to be able to look at everything. I think this is where artificial intelligence and machine learning comes into it, because as humans, we find when we get more and more information, we find it more difficult to actually see the things that are important to us. And we end up in a situation where we're defocused and struggle to understand what's there. And that's why commonly within monitoring environments, we reduce the amount of things we monitor, because it helps us understand things better in looking at a small amount of things. But really, in an IT environment, we need to monitor everything, all of the infrastructure, both physical and also virtual, the containers, the workloads, everything that's there. Once we've got those monitored, then we can actually use artificial intelligence and machine learning to, one, understand, say, seasonal change. And when I see seasonal, it might be day to day, week to week, month to month, not as we would commonly think autumn to winter. Because there may be activities that we do that are quite regular and will actually change what happens within the infrastructure. If we go back to the days that we did backups at night time overnight and large backup runs at weekends, we might see that type of activity and see that as like a seasonal activity. We might have something that happens at the end of each month, so such as an accounts run, that generates a large number of reports, and we can see some changes on the network and the amount of information that's flowing, but also the amount of access to storage systems and the amount of compute capacity being utilized during those periods. So if we can understand that these are normal, what we can do is take those out of the equation when we're looking to remediate when we do have an issue. There's no point alerting on something that's quite normal at that point in time, say on a Sunday night when a backup kicks off, or on a Friday afternoon when some reports are run for an accounting activity. So that's the first stage. Let's understand what normal looks like. Once we've got the idea of what normal is, what we can do then is look for when we're actually moving outside of normal. You know, is this different to what normal looked like on a Wednesday afternoon with this particular compute resource? If it is different, let's look at what's affecting that. Is it the actual asset itself, or it's something that's associated with? And a lot of AIOps and other ITOM platforms see each component in isolation. But I think the key thing to this is actually getting some entity relationships that are dynamic, so we can actually see that this particular container is on this particular host. This particular host is connected to these storage systems and to the rest of the network using these components. So once we've got a picture of that and that entity relationship, we can use that as part of the diagnostics to identify where the actual root cause is, because root cause determination is a key aspect of any activity we do when we've got a fault, an event within our environment. So quite quickly to get to that root cause and determine what the root cause is, then from that for us to be able to then identify some insight information into how to fix it and notify the right person or automate the process if needs be, using runbook scripting, or whether we want to use something like Ansible to actually run some specific code to be able to fix this issue, is quite a key thing. We may also, as I mentioned before, have incidents that are not related to a fault, they're related to capacity. So we may need to increase capacity. A lot of people use load balancers and other mechanisms outside of their key infrastructure to do this. But with an ITOM platform that's got AIOPs capabilities, we can actually utilize that to identify when we've got an increase in capacity requirement. So we can see that large numbers of users are going to a system. It might be an e-commerce platform, it might be an HR platform, it could be a manufacturing system, and at a particular point in time we get a peak usage on it. What we might want to do is increase the amount of capacity or resources that that workload has, so that we can actually give it more resources, so that we can allow more users to access it with a good level of response. Then finally, I think what we've also got to consider is that not everybody looks at it from the technical perspective. I've been in technology for over 40 years, and it's quite easy for me to understand the different technical components that make up a system. And I'm looking at it from that technical side. But if I'm coming from the business side, and I want to understand if my business systems are working correctly, I'm looking at it in a very different way. I'm not interested in the components beneath it that make it work, individual assets that that we've got from an infrastructure perspective. I'm wanting to know if I'm getting the transaction flow that I need. I'm wanting to know if the solution, so the e-commerce platform, is actually available for users to use, and the performance that those users are receiving. The experience is more important, because that experience sometimes will affect us more than actually having an outage. Because if we get people coming onto our site using our e-commerce platform and it's very slow and sluggish, people will jump off and go off to other providers, because there's a lot of people out there selling the same things. So we've got to make sure that we look after our customers well and deliver the best experience. So the ability to actually map the key services, that e-commerce platform, HR platform, manufacturing system, but that's split across multiple cloud environments or on-premise infrastructure made up of many different components. we need to be able to map that out and understand if it's actually delivering what it needs to from an availability and performance perspective, but also if we're seeing any degradation to that service as well, from some of those components. Commonly, we'll build out our application set with quite a lot of high availability. So we have a failure of a component, we've got something that steps in from a network, from a compute, and many other areas will do that. Also, within the development of the application set itself, will deliver some kind of high availability capability. But we need to be able to understand, are we delivering at full capacity, or are we delivering a degraded service because of a loss? And again, we need to quickly identify who needs to look at this and if we can actually automate the process of fixing it. So there's a lot of things that we need to look at in this ITOM AIOps space, and I think it's quite new to a lot of organizations. We've gone down the route of doing traditional monitoring and it's all in isolation, but actually looking at the whole set of infrastructure capabilities, taking feeds from some of the pieces we have in place, some things like syslog activity going into a Splunk engine. We might need to take those feeds as well so we can actually bring all that information together and have a better view, more consistent view of our infrastructure, the events and the metrics that are happening within it. So what I'm going to do next week is go a little bit more into that automation capability. We did a session with Eric Cook where we talked about discovery and some of the basics around that. I think we need to talk more about automation, and a number of conversations I've had recently. Automation is quite critical to those organizations. They're trying to automate for a number of reasons. I think some of the key ones is to speed up the remediation of an issue, but I think the other side of it is getting consistency. If we can get a consistent response each time when we have an event, makes life easier for us, rather than having people doing activities that we end up with varied success in the remediation activity. So hopefully you can join me next week when we talk about automation in more depth. That's OpsRamp's Wednesday, next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Tomorrow is our Tactile Tech Thursday. We're going to talk quite a bit about our digital demonstrator platform tomorrow, because we've been working quite hard with National University and a group that are pulling together a project as a digital servitization demonstrator. And this week is a real start of that process. So we're in that planning stage, and it'd be good to give you a picture of what we're trying to achieve and why, and then how we're going to deliver that over the next 18 to 20 months. So hopefully that was of interest to you today, and hopefully I see you again tomorrow with our Tactile Tech Thursday. On Friday we also talk about Verkada, which is a hybrid cloud security platform for our Verkada Fridays. Or we start again next week with our Diamante Monday, where we're talking everything container, but also stateful workloads running containers as well. Thank you very much. Bye.